I know folks will join us throughout. So let's get started. First, I just want to say welcome, Mandy Moore, to the ColorComm community. Thank you so much for being a part, for having this important conversation on allyship and inclusion. We're so thrilled to be in conversation with you today. I will just introduce ColorComm a little bit and talk about who we are. So we have probably some new audiences on the line. ColorComm is the nation's leading women's platform addressing diversity and inclusion across the communications, marketing, and advertising industry. We are structured as the ColorComm Network, where we are a professional membership organization across 9 U.S. cities. We also have ColorComm Media Group, where we consult with brands on multicultural marketing and communications and media. And then we have the Men of Color and Communications community, and we do a number of things with our Fellows program and produce a very series of conferences and so forth. So if you're new, come and check us out, colorcommnetwork.com, colorcommediagroup.com, and follow us on our platforms. So we're beginning an important conversation on allyship and inclusion. And I guess I shouldn't say beginning, because we've been having these conversations for years. If you joined us last year at the Ritz-Carlton Key Biscayne for our 6th annual conference, we had Brittany Packnett join us on a conversation, Melissa Zorkin from We Communications, and Marjorie Cross from APCO, CEOs of those companies, join us for a very important conversation of advocating for people who don't look like you, opening the door, and what does allyship and inclusion mean to all of us. So, welcome. We're going to have and continue this conversation today. Mandy Moore is just such a phenomenal woman. We all have known in her career for years as an artist, singer and songwriter, actress at the starring show This Is Us. And so someone who has been advocating and already really highlighting these issues as part of Share the Mic Now, and then also on our own platform, really bringing light to social justice issues and justice for Breonna Taylor, and really highlighting Black lives. So thank you, Mandy, for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so honored to have this conversation with you, and I'm so grateful that Share the Mic Now kind of brought us into each other's orbit. This is really exciting.
It is. I am so thankful for that too. If you see me looking down, it's just at the questions. Don't worry, not texting. So I think I want to kick it off, because we've had these conversations, right now, we all understand the climate that we're in right now. And so there's these conversations on allyship, like, what does it really mean? And, it's becoming a buzzword. And so what does, allyship really look like to you?
It is definitely a buzzword. As I've been on this sort of investigative journey, an internal journey myself, looking at my own internalized, sense of racism and white supremacy, I've been reading a lot, specifically on social media, which makes me feel like I have kind of a tricky relationship with the word ally, because I know that it is not sort of the intended goal. Yeah. And I totally understand that. I know that it can't simply be sort of the performative act on social media, that using your platform, and my ability to use my platform is certainly a part of being an ally, but it also sort of, obviously needs to be balanced out with actionable steps rather, towards recognizing and dismantling racism and white supremacy. It's, being an ally is obviously about listening and learning. It's donating, it's signing petitions, it's encouraging people to vote. That is a huge one right now. And also, like I said, it's sort of leaning into the discomfort and looking internally and examining my own role, and how white supremacy has played a role in my life. It's about speaking up when you see racism in action. And obviously, sort of along the lines of what we did with Share the Mic Now, it's about amplifying the voices of and the work of, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And maybe it's sort of pie in the sky. I don't know. I think about like allyship, with an eye towards the future and what it will look like as it sort of evolves in like maybe the next year or so. And I feel like this monumental shift that we've all sort of felt in the last couple of months I hope, I feel like it's sort of forever been etched into the hearts and minds of so many white Americans that carry privilege and power,
Yeah.
that there's really no way to turn back, you know? I know that I'm going to make mistakes. I know I'm going to get things wrong. I understand that. I also fully understand that I will never understand. And I've accepted that all of that is part of the work that I'm going to do every day. So I really hope that, you know, moving forward and looking forward, things are going to feel intrinsically more seamless and fluid, because it's not going to be about a movement. It's going to be about a way of life.
I really like that, and what you had shared, it's like integrated into your everyday life, and it's not just an action that you take to just kind of check the box. It's really about like, how are we opening our minds and just thinking about things in a way that we hadn't before. You know, I always charge people with some like a homework assignment. Like, when you go among your friend group and you're hanging out or you're headed into a meeting, who's not there that should be there? Who is this? Are you, you know, is your group diverse or is it not? I mean, there's so many questions that we could ask ourselves that we just hadn't been asking before. And I think that kind of helps push us in the direction that we want to go in, is with, you know, eyes open.
Eyes open. Eyes open, hearts open, all of that. Minds open.
So you're starring on a very progressive and diverse show, This Is Us, which we all love so much. How does your role as a lead actress in this show impact or influence the world that we live in today?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the power of television certainly can't be ignored, but I don't want to speak on behalf of the entire cast. I mean, I kind of will. I'll speak on behalf of myself. I do know that we all feel unendingly lucky to be a part of a show like This Is Us, that has sort of resonated from the jump so deeply with people, and it does with us as well. And I think we all feel even luckier that like it's been a really substantive journey as well. You know, we're able to sort of delve into issues that aren't necessarily explored on network television, especially to this scale. And I think that's powerful, you know, whether it's race or body image or addiction or adoption and fostering. Like, we don't really back away from the tough topics. But then speaking specifically to this particular conversation, I think the representation of complex Black characters in our show is something that is obviously lacking on primetime television. And through, you know, through Beth and Randall's eyes, and obviously a lot of the other characters on the show as well, I think it gives insight into maybe the Black experience in a predominantly white world. Yeah. And I hope that the way that we approach Black culture and Black way of life feels inclusive and authentic with the show. And it's funny, we've all, you know, we're all very close. We're all sort of a family and have been from the beginning. And we've been keeping in contact like via Zoom and talking about, you know, when the world might sort of open back up again and allow us to get back to work. And really reflecting on, you know, what everybody has sort of been living through, not just with, you know, the pandemic, but protests and the like, and how that might factor into the show moving forward. And we just got the first 2 scripts, and not to like give anything away, but I think in typical This Is Us fashion, like, we're going to address the world that we're living in today. And I think it will be done accurately and sometimes uncomfortably accurate. But I'm excited about that, because I think people have sort of looked at our show as sort of a guidepost of the world we live in, and it's a reflection of who we are and the choices that we make. And I think it's only right that, you know, what we've all kind of been living through and what we're feeling is going to be incorporated in this like next season.
Yeah, because I mean, I think it's so fascinating. So many issues that you talk about and discuss on the show, and even with the Black experience, and just understanding that it's not one way experience. You know, yeah. We live all different lives, and we're a demographic within a demographic within a demographic. So I think that's so fascinating.
Yeah, we try. I know that it means a lot to Sterling, and again, I don't want to like speak on his behalf, but he's been very vocal about like playing, a Black man who's a loving husband and a doting father and has a successful career, and what that sort of image projects to people that maybe don't necessarily have those kind of examples in their world and in their lives. And again, like the breadth and reach of a show that we have, like it's pretty staggering to think like, wow, again, not to speak too highly about like the medium of entertainment, but it does have the ability to change hearts and minds, even in incremental ways. And that's something that's never lost on us. Like, we know we have this responsibility in a way, and it's something that, that means a lot. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, we talk all the time at ColorCom about representation is just so powerful. And oftentimes the images that we see on television characterize, good or bad, what we view of another person or another race or another experience. And
Absolutely.
so I think, the character that he plays and continuing to see those examples is so key, because there's so many people who live that way, and, and it's so important.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about building relationships. It's a two-way street when you build a relationship with someone, and I kind of feel like allyship is that way too. It's not like you're going to tap someone on the shoulder and say, "Can I be your ally?" "Can I be your ally today?" And etc. But how do you kind of build those relationships, would you say, or build relationships with people within power who have influence, who can open that door for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically like the problem is not necessarily women of color not knowing how to approach white women. I think in that sense, the onus is on us as white women to break the barrier. It is about identifying allies and approaching them and paying attention to those who encourage and celebrate others and who are looking to learn and form friendships. And I think there are lots of women that I know specifically, like my friends, we're all looking for ways to continue educating ourselves and to be able to use our influence to lift others up. But having said that, I think when it comes to, white women like opening the door for people that don't necessarily look like them, and, where do we start necessarily? I think you have to not expect extra credit for doing the bare minimum. I would say, it's about being available to new faces and encouraging and offering advice if people ask for it, offering help if people ask for it. If you see that there's a barrier that's blocking the door, speak up. If there's an obstacle that shouldn't be there, do what you can to get it moved out of the way. And I think it's also about making yourself approachable to be tapped on the shoulder. And like we've been saying as well, like an easy place to start is using your social media platform, making sure that, as white women, our social media feed is filled with all kinds of different people that don't have our experience, that don't look like us, that are diverse. And then obviously it's about being quiet and listening. I think sometimes when we stop talking and we pay attention, the opportunities to connect are way more apparent. But I'm still learning as well. And these conversations, although they get me excited, like I'm nervous as well. I'm nervous about messing up. I'm nervous about saying the wrong thing. But that's also what challenges me and what drives me, because I know that like deep down, that is part of the work.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I always say this all the time, and we all have such different experiences, and we all don't grow up the same or being exposed to the same people. And much of how our lives are shaped is what the decisions our parents made for us, right? They decided what neighborhood we're going to live in, what friends we're going to associate with, what schools we're going to go to. We didn't make those decisions. We didn't decide, I want to go to that more diverse school. I mean, those things came from, our parents and our families and things like that. So I think, being at a point into adulthood, if you're open to learn, I think can't be faulted for just learning and growing.
Oh,
so
yeah. Absolutely.
Next question, which I think is in tandem with what we're talking about is, you're part of Share the Mic Now. You were recently part of that initiative. Mm-hmm. You've been posting about Black lives, and ongoingly, it's really something that you've been doing, not just a one-time action. It's just something you've been doing on your social media to bring light to these issues. you know, there's this conversation that we have often is, do you believe it's a celebrity's duty to do that? I mean, to really bring the light, someone who has a huge platform, is it really your duty or responsibility to do that?
I think that we all have this shared responsibility right now in examining our privilege and not limiting that just to race, but also identity and sexuality and able-bodiedness, and continuing obviously to educate ourselves and advocate for equality and justice. But if you happen to be someone who's in the public eye and you have a bigger platform to amplify issues that really resonate with you, I do think that it's neglectful not to. I think there's too much at stake right now in the world that we're living in not to do something. We need all hands on deck to affect change. I mean, I keep thinking about like the election and whatnot, but there's just, I mean, that speaks to broader issues, but you know, also having said that, just because I'm someone that's in the public eye does not make me an authority figure on anything. So I would never want anyone to take my word as gospel. But again, on the other hand, if a post, let's say, that I've put on my social media platform helps a young fan who's looking for a way into the conversation sort of find an easier transition, then that's sort of what it's all about, you know? Yeah. But it sort of has to be treated with a little bit of balance, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what are folks doing with their platform if they're not speaking up or drawing attention to these issues? It's like, you know, you have so many fans of all ages, but yes, young fans do look up to celebrities and really look for you for guidance and insight. So it's, if Mandy Moore is doing it, it must, you know, be something I should be paying attention to.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I mean, maybe in some cases, but
all that pressure on you.
I wouldn't take my word for anything. But you know, you want to set a good example, and I think we all do have this certain responsibility. But it's funny with Share the Mic Now. Again, I'm shout out to my partner Jovi, and I think she might be watching. I love something that Glennon Doyle, who was sort of one of the founders of this particular movement, sort of imparted on all of us. She's like, you know, my activism is like a glacier. The 20% that you see on social media or the so-called like performative aspect is what, you know, that's what people see. But the work is really about the 80% that's underwater, you know? And I try to think about that because it is overwhelming. We all are living on Zooms and on our phones, and, you know, we're living in sort of a virtual world even more so now than ever because of the pandemic. And it is overwhelming. I feel like we're being inundated with all kinds of messaging, and it's important to sort of, you know, I think take a moment to sort of take stock of how you really feel and to educate yourself. But, you know, I've had to take periods where I, you know, have taken a step back, and I'm still, you know, being a voyeur and looking on social media. But I also know myself enough to know that, like, I don't know if it's beneficial or if I'm being helpful to myself or somebody else right now, because I want to be in learning mode, or I just want to sort of absorb instead of, you know, constantly filter out information.
Yeah. Which is, you know, understandable. I mean, I think we all need to take a step back because we can go nuts on social media. I mean, honestly, I mean, it's like, you know, like what you said, I mean, so much of anybody's work is going to be done behind the scenes if you're really working at it, quote unquote. It's just, sometimes it's frustrating because you only take, or you see what you see on a post and you take it for, this is all that they're doing. But no one's gonna like send you a press release or you're not gonna update your fans every time you're doing something behind the scenes. I mean, it's just work that you do. So, but like, how do you advocate for inclusivity in Hollywood? I mean, what are some of the things that you see that maybe could be changing in light of these times?
That is a very good question, and something I have an eye towards moving forward. I don't know if people out there saw the Twitter thread, maybe it made its way to Instagram as well. It was sort of like a yearbook spread of all of the folks in power, like the power structure and the different studios and networks and stuff. It was bleak. I was not even fully aware. You know, I think like most industries, it was mostly comprised of older white men across the board, and that was just shameful. But I think sometimes it takes like actually seeing something like that sort of acute level of awareness for things to change. I mean, when I think personally about how I can factor in, I think it's about not being silent. I think it's about asking questions and making a fuss. And also, you know, as an actor, it's like questioning projects from its inception. To the extent that I have say or sway in something, like what is the story that we're telling? Who wrote it? Who's going to be involved? What is the cast going to look like? How is this project going to be marketed? Stuff like that, I think, moving forward is going to be something that's more top of mind for me. Instead of just like agreeing to something and not asking questions necessarily until you get there or after the fact, it's like that's not going to move the needle at all.
And you learn, yeah, after the fact, you learn later and say, well, why wasn't this person voice included, or why wasn't this writer, you know, whose ideas contributed, or just like it's too late to fix, you know, inclusivity after the fact, diversity after the fact, but maybe there's something that could be done in that process.
Yes.
Yeah. So I just, you know, sharing, like, what are you currently doing to elevate like people of color and Black voices, you know, in your line of work, and kind of seeing what you've done on social? And
yeah, I mean, I think like I said, I'm embarrassed, and I feel guilty that it's taken this moment for me to really examine my complicity in this system of oppression and how I've benefited from my whiteness without even ever like acknowledging that it's existed. But, you know, having said that, it's valuable to examine the past with an eye towards the future, and how I can personally help amplify the voices of, you know, people of color. And our show is one thing, and I think that it's always sort of leaned on being inclusive and diverse. It's just the nature of the stories that we're telling. And I think, like I said earlier, I think the show is really going to lean into that all the more moving forward. And I'm going to continue to use my social media platforms and to listen and learn and all of that. But I also have the privilege of having a production company that came by way of being a part of the show. So I'm going to be able to, you know, actively seek out new voices and narratives and be able to leverage the relationships that I've formed, you know, from being in the industry for the last 20 years to get the job done and to tell stories that aren't necessarily being told right now. You know, I think it sometimes takes the position of power of like being a producer, you know, whose job it is to sort of find material and will it into existence, and who's able to, you know, put their money where their mouth is because they have the ability and the support and all of that for tides to really turn. You know, it's just recognizing the fact that somehow I've had the good fortune of being allotted a seat at the table. So I'm going to do whatever I can in this position to help, you know, dismantle an unjust system. And I'm really excited about being able to do that, you know, specifically with the production company and having the ability to tell new stories and find new voices. Like, I'm very, very excited to be tasked with that.
I mean, that's where the power is. And I mean, I think that's like critically important to be able to weigh in and make those decisions, really, honestly.
Yes.
So that's awesome.
I can't wait.
So, you know, I think we'll kind of wrap it up and open it for questions in just a moment. But I wanted to ask you, you know, much of the conversation I'm sure you've seen is this dichotomy between, you know, corporations putting out statements saying that, you know, they care about Black lives, but leadership isn't Black or people of color. And you had mentioned that, you know, with Hollywood and white leaders at some of these big studios. So what are your just thoughts in terms of how do we build more of like an inclusive environment? And also, because that statement doesn't really measure up, what should companies be doing, really?
I mean, wow. Corporate America, speaking of corporate America, feels like it's way above my pay grade. But I think the industry more specifically.
Industry, yeah.
Yeah, like the entertainment industry, I think when it comes to the entertainment industry, it should be about standing aside and letting, you know, Black folks help drive the conversation and decide the course of action. I think it's about listening. when they're speaking about everyday racism, and honoring their feelings, ensuring that people feel respected and valued and heard. Obviously, you know, we have to talk about anti-racism training and policies and making sure that that stuff is solidified and in place. I think a big thing is fixing the disparity in wages. You know, equal pay and paying people a living wage is a huge thing. And also a complete review of hiring and development and promotional practices, I think, is going to be a big deal in the entertainment industry. And being able to just be intentional about championing Black talent across the board, whether it's people behind the scenes or in front of the camera, you know, the like. And I think, you know, co-conspirators, again, allies need to be able to speak up when more change can be had, when more things can be done. I've seen, like, specifically in the music industry, they have, there have been like big like record label conglomerates that have set up like these large funds that are going towards charitable organizations that are helping with social justice issues, and they're helping, you know, fight like violence and racism. That's a start. That's a big deal. And then people like, I don't know if you saw Ryan Reynolds recently launched something, I think it's called the Group Effort Initiative, where he's like starting a new movie soon, and he is going to be calling like talent from marginalized communities across the board, and sort of paying them, bringing them onto set, letting them sort of get involved into the action directly and learning on the job, which is a huge deal. But again, like I think it's incumbent upon all of us that have that sort of power. He has the power of being a movie star, but also a producer, to be able to affect change in that way. And I think that's like, it's admirable, but it's also just what we need to be doing moving forward.
Definitely. So, okay, I want to ask you a question that's not related, but kind of, I mean, so we've been dealing with the pandemic and social injustice. How have you like kept to a routine? Like, where do you draw from inspiration? Maybe your music? Where do you go to like unwind and relax? Maybe somewhere in your home, or just, how
have you been dealing with everything? How do you unwind and relax? I want to know.
With a lovely bottle of wine in the wine fridge. No, I mean,
always the right answer.
I'm in New York City, so I feel like I've really, you know, lived through the craziness of the pandemic, and our city is really doing things right, I believe.
Yes.
I live in Manhattan, and so, yeah, I mean, I think it's just so challenging. I mean, you feel like you are doing more work. I would just say more so on my end on the work that we do. I feel like we've been way busier than we've ever been, especially on the client side. And it just feels like you need a break. But it feels like you're kind of working overtime. That's how I feel. Because much of what we do is on the diversity, inclusion, and training and issues and counseling and crisis communications, and then also with our member community, so providing programming and all that jazz.
Wow. Yeah, you're busier than ever, and it's like in one way it's a blessing, but yeah, you can't ignore the fact that like self-care also has to be a priority. And it's hard to delineate, I mean, between like the work day and then just like free time. We had a really tough time. I'm quarantining with my husband, but like initially it was really challenging to feel like what was the dividing line between like answering work emails and like the day being done, and then being able, like we were finding ourselves like in the beginning of everything, like working on the weekends and stuff. And it was important for us to sort of find, you know, what made us feel comfortable. Also, it's like every day is different, right? Like we're complex humans, and I feel like on any given day I could wake up and not feel my best, and it's like Groundhog Day. And it's about shutting off my phone and like indulging in like wine and french fries and watching, you know, reruns of 30 Rock, and that's what makes me feel good. And then on other days it's, you know, being creative makes me feel great. Meditating, exercising, like feeling like I'm the most fully realized best version of myself also, you know, sometimes like does the trick, but trying to find a way to have grace for myself and the way that I do for others has been a real lesson for me during this time, because I think that is important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. We're kind of all in this together, which is such a great equalizer. So some days it's good, some days we're just trying to get by.
That is the truth.
Well, we are going to open up the floor quickly to answer, to take questions from the audience. Please raise your hand. One of the things I want to set some parameters around some questions is please keep your questions to about 20 seconds so we have enough time for a few people to answer them. And I see them in the chat box. If you could do a raise hand. I don't know, Jocelyn, if you can see some questions. Jocelyn usually.
Yes, I see the Q&A, so I will call on people from here. I see a question here that says, how do you approach having difficult conversations in your life with people with different views or who may not be on the same journey?
I mean, I have found, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, Lauren, if you've had to have some uncomfortable conversations, but I have found that having patience with myself and with said person that I'm having the conversation with is the best course of action, knowing that you're not going to necessarily change hearts and minds immediately. Like it needs to be fluid. It's going to be sort of an ongoing experience. It is challenging and it can be really frustrating. So again, I think that's where patience has to factor in. But there's all kinds of great, like I've read all kinds of great articles and tips and tricks and stuff online for, you know, how to approach parents versus friends versus coworkers. Because I think you have to consider the relationship before you consider like, you know, the right approach, I think.
I think you answered that. Great.
Okay, so I see Cheyenne has her hand raised, so I'll call on Cheyenne. Cheyenne, you could unmute yourself and go on video if you would like.
Hi, I don't know if I can get my video working, but hi Mandy, big fan. Here from Florida, but my question is just from your status as a public figure and in talks with some other prominent voices in Hollywood, I would love just some insight into the conversations you've heard about like possible changes in the industry, like what you think is possibly coming down the pipeline and if you think that momentum will last.
That's a fantastic question. Hi, Florida, my home state. You know, I haven't had too many specific conversations. I think it's been challenging, you know, existing in sort of this Zoom virtual world and without like tangibly getting back to work necessarily. I feel like it's sort of been incumbent upon us as individuals to figure out our course of action. I think Hollywood is still realigning and readjusting, and there have been some big shifts, but I'm looking forward to getting back to work and feeling what those changes are in the workplace, like from my perspective and my sort of like, you know, experience being on a set and being in Hollywood in that sense. Everything, it doesn't feel so tangible right now because again, we're just living in this world where we're all sort of communicating from home. It's like once we're able to like get back, I'm looking forward to seeing like what feels different.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, so I see a Grace Colker here, so I'll unmute you, Grace, so you can ask your question.
Hi, how are you guys doing today?
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. I'm here with my husband. We're actually on a beach vacation, but I chose to do this because I think this is so important, this conversation. So my question is really just twofold. What's the most difficult conversation you've had since this unrest began a few months ago? And then what did it take for you to actually stay in that conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I hope you're having a fantastic time on your vacation. Thanks for taking time away from the sun to hang with us.
It's a beach birthday baby moon. We got all kinds of things happening.
Congratulations. Congratulations. And
Thanks.
happy birthday, all of that.
Thanks.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I was surprised, actually. I thought I was gonna have a really challenging conversation with my dad, who I'm very close to, who is, quite conservative, grew up in Florida, and we've never really had conversations about race. And I know that oftentimes with politics, we see ourselves on different sides of the divide, and that has been challenging. So I was like fully prepared and armed with the same sort of vim and vigor that I have when approaching politics, to have these conversations. I think it was right after George Floyd was killed. And I have to be honest, I was so surprised that at my dad's compassion and willingness to have the conversation and willingness to admit his own privilege and still sort of swimming in the new waters of understanding that concept and the way he was raised and his background, factoring all of that in, and in the course of one conversation really feeling his guilt and his shame all sort of coalescing around really understanding his place in the world and how he can be better moving forward. I fortunately haven't had, too many, I can't say that I've really had any super uncomfortable conversations. I feel lucky that I feel like what's been happening in the world has hit the people in my world closest to me the same way that it sort of hit me. And it's been this intense period of self-reflection and having uncomfortable conversations. I mean, uncomfortable in the sense that I can't believe that this is only just sort of, we're only sort of just stepping into this realization now, not having to necessarily challenge people's points of view. But I'm fully prepared to have those conversations. I'm fully prepared to point out racism and white supremacy when I see it moving forward. I haven't necessarily had to do that in my life thus far.
No, thank you. And I think probably the circles that you are running in, it makes sense that would be your reality. I think part of my upset initially after Amy Cooper and George Floyd was I felt like America and white America was Columbusing racism. Where I was duh, we've been saying this for generations. So, but thank you I think you've always been an ally. And so I really, really appreciate you having this conversation. And then Lauren, always thank you. You just always ahead of the game, always on the cusp. So always appreciate you. Have been the first conference, and you just always, Lauren brings excellence to everything. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for your questions, Grace.
No problem. You guys rock.
Thank you, Grace. Do we have time for one more, Lauren?
Do we have time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. So,
all right, we'll do one more, and we have to get you down to Florida, down to Miami for our live event. We bring 600 women down, Ritz-Carlton, Key Biscayne, in Miami, Florida. It's fantastic. So we have to
sign me up anytime.
Awesome.
all right, great. So I see Lily here has her hand raised. So Lily, if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, thank you so much. Basically, you're an inspiration to so many young women around the world. If you could talk to especially young Black women who are looking to get into the industry, what would you tell them?
Oh my goodness, that's very kind of you to say. I would say the same thing to any young woman. I mean, make sure that you're surrounding yourself with good people first and foremost, people that are going to be unendingly supportive of you and champion you no matter what. But recognize that this industry is difficult, and I think you have to, again, have grace with yourself and have patience and recognize that rejection is going to be the name of the game in many instances, and you really have to dig deep and make sure that this is something you are truly passionate about, because otherwise I feel like the industry is just, it's a tough, It's a tough one. And I, you know, personally have I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I have ridden the ebbs and flows of a career, and at many times have sort of wanted to sort of throw in the towel. But my love and passion for being an actor and being a musician and having the opportunity to have that platform and truly delve into something that I love is sort of what's kept me going. So I say, yeah, own your moment, surround yourself with good people, and keep going.
Fantastic. Well, we'll leave it there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, Mandy, so much
Thank
for your
you.
time, for being a part of our community, for being a part of this conversation. I want to continue having many more of these conversations. So I just appreciate your time, and I hope we can all gather again together live. For those of you who are on the line, if you would like to become a ColorCom member, we're sending out information about that. We're waiving the one-time initiation fee of $150. So join, it'll just be $17.50 a month or $210 a year. We'd love to welcome you all into our community. And we hope to gather again with you soon. And thank you so much, Mandy.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to all of the ColorCom staff for making this happen too. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in person very soon.
Yes. All right. Have a good day.
Bye.